Good morning, everyone. We're gathered today on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 6, and I acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. I'm joined today by Renaud, Executive Director of the Leduc and District Food Bank Association, Ariana Scott, the Executive Officer of Food Banks Alberta, and NDP Leader Rachel Notley. Thank you, Gert, for hosting us today, and thank you, Ariana, who lives in Fort McMurray, for taking the time out of your trip to join us here. In 2021, Alberta's food bank use was one of the highest in the country, rising by almost 30%, and preliminary data shared by Alberta Food Banks indicates that demand for their service continues on a similar trend for 2022. Inflation is at nearly a 40-year high. The national inflation rate hit 8.1% in June, according to Statistics Canada. In Alberta, the rate was even higher at 8.4%, while wage growth in the province has significantly lagged behind. That means families are feeling a cut in their real wages. Meanwhile, Albertans are paying more income taxes, property taxes, school fees, tuition, interest on student debt, park fees, and utilities. The UCP also cut the child and family benefit, seniors benefit, income support, and assured income for the severely handicapped. The Consumer Debt Index shows that in April, half of Albertans were just $200 away from not being able to pay their bills at the end of the month, the highest level in this country, and many families are in crisis. In my constituency of St. Albert, Susan Creasy, director of the food bank, told the St. Albert Gazette that some of their clients have utility bills that are $1,100, and some clients are reporting power bills have doubled compared to last year. Creasy said people are really struggling, and the increased level of stress is palpable in that community. As you will hear from Gert and Ariana, St. Albert's Food Bank story is repeated right across the province. So now I'd like to turn it over to Gert Renaud, the Executive Director of the Leduc and District Food Bank Association.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for having us today. We definitely have been seeing a huge increase in our demand, but I'm sorry, I know I'm live, I'm sorry. We've been serving 7 municipalities within Leduc County for over 40 years and rely on community donations and volunteer support in order to provide short-term assistance to a population of approximately 85,000. Usually clients need our food bank services once or twice and then they're on their own. What we are now seeing is that they're needing to use us every month over a longer period of time, and they're just not able to make ends meet. With the rising cost of living and inflation impacting all Albertans, we have seen a correlation in the number of clients we usually serve, resulting in an increase of 25 to 35% and higher some months. For any size food bank, this increase is huge. We are seeing lots of new people who have never used a food bank or need any type of social services before. Access to income support and mental health is very difficult at times and a huge barrier for clients. This just compounds their struggles to make ends meet. These are people who are making a good living, but now the jobs aren't there, or their hours have been cut back, or they haven't gotten a raise to keep up with inflation. So they are finding it challenging to make it paycheck to paycheck. The increase in utility bills in particular has really impacted people who find themselves needing our services. For homeowners, their costs are rising. And for those that rent, well, as cost increases for landlords, those costs are passed on to the tenants. After a long winter, Albertans usually catch a break on their bills in the summer. We're not seeing that happening this time. For example, we have a family who have an open mortgage, so their monthly payment went from $1,300 a month to $2,300 a month. That's a huge, huge increase for a family to have to account for from their income. That's taken a huge chunk out of whatever extra disposable income they had. There are many families caught in unfortunate situations like this. But maintaining consistent support can be challenging with the high cost of living, also negatively impacting our organizations. The increased cost of utilities and food purchases for our warehouse takes away from programming and cuts into the amount we can spend on food and necessities for our clients. The increased cost of gas impacts us. Our vehicles are on the road a lot, picking up 7 days a week. Our people here in Leduc and in all communities in the province still need our support and services, and those needs are increasing. Food banks are meant to be a stopgap, not a solution. Something needs to be done about the cost of living in this province so that Alberta families are being crushed by the anxiety of trying to make ends meet, and we can return to being a gap filler.
Sorry. So thank you very much, Gert, and thank you for the amazing work that you do. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Ariana Scott, who is the CEO of Food Banks Alberta.
Thank you, Marie. As a provincial association of food banks, we currently represent 107 food banks across the province, and I can confidently say that all 107 are seeing an alarming increase in their need for their services. Out of our member food bank network, the majority have reported that their clients' reasons for accessing the food bank are rising costs of utility, static government benefits, unemployment, inflation, and the rising cost of food. Approximately 60% of Alberta households accessing a food bank are reliant on government benefits like employment insurance, income support, AISH, or the Canadian Child Benefit to support their households. For example, since the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen an increase in seniors, particularly in our rural communities, accessing food banks across the province. Those who were barely scraping by before just can't make it work now. Not only is this crisis in the cost of living forcing some Albertans to choose between paying their bills and putting food on their tables, like Gert said, our food banks are also experiencing negative impacts due to the rising cost of food, utilities, transport, and fuel, which is challenging their abilities to serve their communities. For example, just the pressure of rising cost of food alone can mean that items like fresh produce, dairy, meat are cost prohibitive, and especially for our smaller, more rural food banks that are supporting a large catchment area. You can imagine that the impact these have on individuals and families, even those who are not considered to be low income. Often, families and children go without essential nutrition, such as dairy, as it's considered a luxury for those who live in poverty. While food banks across the province are trying their best to support their communities, increased demand means an increased strain on their resources. As a provincial association, we do our best to keep costs low for our members and to help them meet the needs of their communities. Our food bank warehouse numbers indicate that the number of food banks we distribute to has increased to 60% since 2021, but donations have decreased by more than 34%. Simply put, we are getting less food and distributing to more food banks, but there are less donations for them as well. In today's economy, the choice to donate to a charity is often the first expenditure that a family or a corporation will cut in tough times. We are seeing people who used to be donors to food banks now becoming clients of food banks. This is often the first time that these families have ever had to access any form of social service, let alone a food bank. Add to that the fact that food banks don't qualify for most government funding. The COVID fund in 2020 was the first time that the Alberta government has ever designated money specifically to food banks. As we transition out of the COVID pandemic, one of the things we would like to address is that the government recognize that food insecurity is a major issue in our province. Like Gert said, food banks are not the answer to food insecurity. We're a gap filler. And without food banks, you will have Albertans everywhere going without access to food. This is the perfect storm that has the potential to particularly overwhelm, especially our smaller, more rural food banks, if the costs remain high and the demands continue to increase.
Great. Thank you so much, Ariana. Now I'm going to turn it over to Leader of the New Democrats, Rachel Notley.
Well, thank you, Marie, and thank you, Gert, for hosting us, and of course, thank you, Ariana, for your advocacy as well as the information that both of you are providing to Albertans today. And thank you for the work that all of you do supporting your food banks and helping families across the province. We know that no one comes to a food bank because they've suddenly run out of food. It is, in fact, a significant change in circumstance that has impacted them and caused them to start seeking this form of support for them and their families. Food banks are no longer just supporting the most vulnerable lower income wage earners in our province. The fact is, many individuals and families who were once characterized as comfortable middle class family members are now also accessing this support for the first time. We've heard about folks who are homeowners now having to come here because the cost of their home has pushed them into a place of needing to supplement their monthly food budget. But as Ariana said, food banks are also just not a long-term solution. We are in the worst crisis of affordability that we have seen in this province in the last 40 years. And what that means is that Albertans need their government to understand that and to act to give Albertans help today. Now, my heart goes out to parents who are watching more and more of their paycheck vanish at the grocery checkout and the gas pump, and when the bills show up and they are left wondering where they are going to be in the next 6 months, while at the same time wondering how they're going to make sure that their kids get healthy food this day. And as Marie said, the UCP has made a bad situation worse by increasing income taxes, property taxes, school fees, utilities, auto insurance, tuition, debt on student loans, park and camping fees, while at the same time actually cutting benefits to families who need them the most. Now, last week, I called on the UCP to immediately return to the legislature with us in the NDP and to reverse the policies that they have put in place that are making life so much less affordable for Alberta families. The fact is, if we took action right now, an average family of 4 would find themselves with $350 more, and a low-income senior couple would see themselves with $400 more. We can also help Albertans by freezing post-secondary tuition, cutting the interest on student loans, and putting a cap back on car insurance. There are simple, specific actions that we can take today. And when we learned yesterday that our electricity prices just hit the highest point that they have ever hit in the history of the province, we also know we can't wait until October for this government to get itself refocused, if at all, on the interests and the priorities of Albertans. I want to say this, we all know that there is an election coming. An Alberta NDP government, led by me, will always be focused on keeping more money in the pockets of Albertans and ensuring that their priorities are front and center of the day-to-day work done by their government. So thank you, and any of us here are happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks, and we'll start with questions in the room. And we'll go to questions on the phone. Just a reminder to press *9 if you're joining us on the phone, or use the raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. And seeing none, that's all for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.